Hi Ivan, so here we are for our second episode, and has it now reached the point with Jim Murphy that it's like the opposition fans singing Murphy must stay, because it's not been the best of days for them?
It absolutely has not, and it's been quite an incredible development. It's one of these things that happens in the heat of the last few weeks of an election campaign. Jim Murphy, who spent so much time on the debate at the weekend talking about how they weren't like the Tories and there was no need for cuts, has had the ground cut away from underneath him by Chuka Ummuna. We could say he's been chucked under the bus because Jim Murphy's now gone to ground, no sign of him, and he'll need to come out and do some explaining because it's been made very, very clear that his views on Labour economic policy are completely and utterly irrelevant.
I won't bother reading the quote out because time is short here, but I'll stick it out on the blog post. But I mean, it didn't leave much wiggle room for him.
Absolutely not. And there's what's been said about the fact that Labour are so close to the Tory policy on austerity at a UK level, and also exposing the fact that Jim Murphy doesn't speak for the Labour Party in terms of economic policy. So it's very much the branch manager.
So you said that, it's that they're taking no interest in him. Is it possible that it's not so much they're taking no interest in them, but they've actually hung him out to dry here? It would be unusual.
I don't think there's anything deliberate here. I think it's just a question of they've been caught in terms of somebody saying one thing and somebody saying another, and at the end of the day, Chuck had no choice but to pull rank and stick to the UK Labour Party policy. Jim's been caught pushing out a line that isn't the policy, and that's what happens. I don't think there's anything deliberate on it, but it is kind of interesting because at a UK level, of course, Labour's going to win this election by winning seats from the Tories in England, and they'll do a deal with SNP as they need to do after the election. So frankly, when they're given a choice, as we've said all along, their focus is on winning votes in the south of England from the Tories, and that's what they're going to focus on, regardless of what is going on in Scotland.
Yeah, and since then he's also turned down an interview to speak on television tonight, and I wonder why. But okay. But to come to the substance of it, because one of the things Murphy was often saying was that the cuts will not affect Scotland, and Scotland there won't be cuts. And this is the most important thing. If a Labour government comes in, will there be cuts in Scotland, and how will it affect us?
Yeah, I mean, if there's cuts to the overall spending settlement in the UK, then the way Barnett formula works at the moment, those cuts all get reflected in Scotland. There's no doubt about that, and that's the way it'll go. So it'll be more of the same of what we've had. The Scottish Government will be under huge pressure to survive in that environment. Now, this really leads us on to the discussion we had yesterday around about the whole full fiscal autonomy situation. And there's an interesting development there today. Alex Salmond writing in The National, talking about the principle of no detriment that we touched on yesterday. It was very clearly explained in the Smith Commission, and also I was just looking at the paper, the UK government paper that came out in January of this year, when they went into more detail behind it, the Smith Commission.
Can you just give us a brief wee explanation of the principle of no detriment?
Yeah, as I said, basically what it means is that if you take where we are in the year before a change, and then you implement that change, you basically set the baseline to say that there would be no detriment, so nobody, Scotland or the rest of the UK aren't any better or any worse off. At that point, you transfer the powers and you make adjustments in the financial settlement, which would be an evolution of Barnett to take account of the fact. Now, there'll always be transfers because Scotland needs to transfer money to the UK to pay for shared services, etc. And into that calculation will go an adjustment to make sure that there's no gain or loss by virtue of the fact you've transferred those powers. It's in Smith, it's been signed up to in Smith, and that's the way it works based on what's been agreed. So it's very, very clear, as Alex Salmond explains in his article, that the principle of no detriment means that the adjustments to the Barnett formula are such that Scotland wouldn't lose out. There needs to be an adjustment made anyway because we need to pay something back for central and shared services in the UK, and part of that adjustment would take account of the fact that the principle of no detriment means you start on day one, nobody's better or worse off, and then you move on from there.
And then there was another thing in the news today about a certain country that left the United Kingdom and seems to be doing rather well.
Yeah, this was the other funny thing, and you couldn't get the timing better. Murphy was harping on at the weekend about how it was impossible to get growth rates of more than a couple of percent, and how could Scotland possibly imagine that we could do any better than that? Well, there's Ireland have come out today as an article in the Irish Times. Ireland's hit 5% growth rates, and it looks like it's going to do that for 3 years in a row at least, the way things are going. And this isn't unusual. Very often, countries that come through some kind of change in their economic circumstances, some kind of change in the business model, if you like, the way things are organised, who's pulling the levers, the focus and direction of policy to a significant extent. You're in a new environment, and this will be full fiscal autonomy will be a significantly different environment to what we'd been in before. Very often that unleashes a lot of growth potential in the economy, especially in the case of a country like Scotland. There is a lot of capacity there, productive capacity to be used, and you get a very large potential for investment and growth in the economy. So it's all there to be done. It's a question of getting control of those levers and making it happen.
So just to finish up, is it true that the Irish have only been able to do this because they've been free of the terrible millstone around their neck of having like loads of oil?
Kind of looks like that, doesn't it?
Thanks, Ivan.
Thank you. Talk to you tomorrow.